So, what if I told you that an artificial intelligence recently analyzed something like 4 million human decisions and mathematically proved that you make exactly 47 predictable, like highly exploitable mistakes every single time you try to learn something new?
I mean, it sounds a little insulting at first,
Right.
but it's actually fascinating.
It really is. Think about the last time you tried to pick up a new skill. You're learning a language or coding or maybe public speaking.
Right.
For the first few months, you are just an absolute sponge. The progress is intoxicating and you're measurably better every single week. But then right around month 6, you hit the wall.
Yeah, the dreaded plateau. It's a universally frustrating human experience. You feel all this effort going in, but the return on that investment has completely flatlined.
Exactly. You're putting in the same amount of time, but the needle just refuses to move. And breaking through that wall is our mission today. We're going to deconstruct exactly how we acquire mastery.
But we're doing it through a very, very unexpected lens.
Yeah, totally. Our sources today are a stack of strategy guides and some promotional literature from a company called RangeFlowAI. And they make a data-driven training system specifically for poker players.
Which, on the surface, might seem incredibly niche.
Right, but stick with us because even if you have never picked up a deck of cards in your life, even if you don't know the rules of the game, this deep dive is really about the science of active learning.
Yeah, it's about closing that massive gap between knowing what you're supposed to do and, like, actually doing it when the pressure is on.
And maybe most importantly, it's about how artificial intelligence is exposing the blind spots in human psychology. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because the very first thing these RangeFlow documents do is completely dismantle the most common piece of advice given to anyone trying to get better at anything.
Yeah, the old adage to just put in the hours.
Right. Volume is the answer. We hear this constantly, like, just play more, just practice more. But the documents make this really bold claim right out of the gate. Playing 1,000 more hands of poker does not fix a bad habit.
It really targets a massive misconception about skill acquisition. There's this assumption that reps automatically equal improvement,
Mm-hmm.
but repetitions without an objective feedback loop.
Yeah.
That is just reinforcing whatever you're already doing, whether it's brilliant or, you know, terrible.
Wow, yeah.
If your default reaction in a specific high-pressure situation is mathematically incorrect, executing that same incorrect reaction 1,000 more times doesn't fix the flaw. It cements it. It just makes the wrong decision feel incredibly natural.
It's like driving a car. You can commute every single day for 20 years, putting in massive volume. But if nobody ever sits in the passenger seat and tells you that tailgating the car in front of you at 70 miles an hour is dangerous.
You don't become a master driver.
Exactly. You just become a really confident, terrible driver.
Yeah. And the sources actually outline two distinct types of learners to illustrate this exact trap. First, they detail what they call Player A. So Player A has been playing for 5 years. He puts in massive volume, playing 3 or 4 nights a week. And he considers himself a student of the game because he watches training videos whenever he feels like it.
Sounds like most people, honestly.
Right. Yet, his actual results, his profit, have been completely stagnant for 2 years. He is permanently trapped on the plateau.
Oh, wow.
And then they contrast that with Player B. She's only been playing for a year. She plays half as much as Player A, maybe twice a week. But she spends 20 minutes a day doing structured, active training with an AI.
Just 20 minutes.
Just 20. And her results have been on a steady, aggressive upward curve since her 3rd month.
And the sources are like absolutely brutal about the way Player A is studying. They call watching training videos and reading forums passive learning. They compare it to watching a cooking show on television and expecting to suddenly become a Michelin star chef.
Which is such a great analogy.
It is. Like you might pick up a neat trick for chopping onions, but you aren't actually building the cognitive pathways that matter when the dinner rush hits and the kitchen is literally on fire. But I do have to ask, why is the human brain so resistant to correcting its own mistakes without outside feedback? Why can't Player A just look at his bank account, realize he's messing up, and course correct on his own?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it comes down to the application problem. Player A doesn't lack knowledge, right? He knows the rules. He understands the advanced terminology in a vacuum.
Right, theory versus practice.
Exactly. Theory is clean, but reality is messy. When you're actually sitting at the table, when the pot is growing, the clock is ticking, and your heart rate spikes, human beings do not default to their highest level of theoretical knowledge. They default to their deepest level of instinct.
And instinct is essentially just gut feeling.
Yes, an instinct without a feedback loop is a remarkably deceptive teacher. Let's look at the mechanism of how our brains process outcomes. If you rely solely on your gut, every result reinforces a completely distorted view of reality.
How so?
Imagine you make a terrible, mathematically indefensible decision, but you get lucky and win a massive pot. Your brain gets a huge dopamine hit and says, "Fantastic, that was genius, do it again."
Oh, right.
Conversely, if you make the mathematically perfect decision, but you get unlucky and lose the hand because of some random card, your brain registers the pain and says, "That was awful, never do that again."
Wow. So the brain is tying the quality of the decision to the random outcome of the event.
Precisely. You need an external system to sever that tie. You have to separate the logic of your decision from the randomness of the result, or you're just going to constantly learn the wrong lessons.
Okay, so if logging endless hours doesn't work and passively studying theory doesn't work, why do players who actually try to execute the correct textbook moves still end up losing? Because the sources dive pretty deep into this paradox.
You do, yeah.
We're shifting from how people fail to learn to what they are specifically getting wrong when they sit down to perform. And here's where it gets really interesting. RangeFlow didn't just ask a bunch of professionals for their subjective opinions.
No, they went straight to the raw data.
They fed 4 million real-world hands into their AI, 4 million data points of human behavior. And they found that the average thinking player, the one who's desperately trying to play correctly, makes 47 specific, exploitable mistakes every single time they sit down.
And to understand why those mistakes happen, we have to look at what the sources call the chess versus checkers dilemma.
Okay, lay that out for us.
Over the last decade, the poker training world has become obsessed with a concept called GTO, which stands for Game Theory Optimal. It involves using massive supercomputers to calculate the mathematically perfect, unexploitable way to play every single combination of cards.
It's the chess strategy. It's just beautiful, complex math.
It is, but it contains a massive trap. You're taking a theoretical strategy designed for a solved game, and you're trying to apply it against unsolved, highly irrational opponents.
Ah.
The sources refer to these unpredictable recreational players as donks players who make low-quality decisions, who play based on emotion, boredom, or just the sheer thrill of gambling. When you attempt to use a mathematically perfect GTO strategy against an opponent who isn't playing rationally, your textbook play actually becomes the wrong play.
Wait, I have to stop you there because that makes absolutely zero sense to me.
I know, it's counterintuitive.
Yeah, like if game theory optimal is literally defined as the mathematically perfect, unexploitable way of play, how can using it possibly be the wrong move? How does playing perfectly make me the sucker at the table?
Because the mathematically perfect play assumes that your opponent is also playing perfectly, or at least rationally. GTO is designed to prevent a genius from exploiting you, but it is not designed to extract the maximum amount of money from a bad player.
Oh, I see.
Let me give you some concrete data from the text to illustrate the mechanism here. The AI analyzed those 4 million hands and isolated a specific scenario. Let's say you bet aggressively on all 3 rounds as the shared community cards are dealt face up on the table.
Okay.
In poker terminology, this is called firing a triple barrel. And let's say the final cards dealt look incredibly dangerous, what they call a scary run out, where, a flush or a straight suddenly becomes possible.
So there's a lot of money in the middle, and the board looks terrifying.
Exactly. The AI found that in this exact scenario, 67% of average players will overfold. They get scared of the dangerous cards, and they throw their hands away far more often than the math says they should.
Wow, 67%.
Yeah. Now, if you are playing textbook GTO theory, you're supposed to bluff in that spot only a very specific, balanced percentage of the time just to keep an expert opponent guessing. But you aren't playing an expert. You're playing a human being who is demonstrably terrified.
Oh, wow, okay. If theory says to only bluff 20% of the time, but the data proves that 67% of the time the guy across from you is just going to surrender, being balanced is actively costing you money.
Precisely.
The maximally profitable move is to completely ignore the math and just bluff him relentlessly.
The reality dictates the strategy. And the sources provide another really fascinating example of this. The AI tracked aggressive players and found that 81% of them will completely shut down their aggression if they face a specific move called a check raise on a paired board.
Let's translate that for the non-poker players real quick.
Sure. So a paired board is when the shared cards in the middle of the table show a pair, making rare, powerful hands like three of a kind possible. A check raise is when you act first. You pretend to be weak by passing the turn to your opponent, let them bet, and then aggressively raise them back.
So you spring a trap.
Exactly. You spring a trap. The data shows that 81% of aggressive players basically have a fight or flight response to this trap, and they choose flight. They surrender.
81%?
Yes. Again, this isn't a guess. It's a documented behavioral pattern across millions of interactions. If you try to play balance theory against that aggressive player, you will struggle. But if you adopt what the sources called the Donkunder mindset, you stop guessing.
You just rely on the concrete pool tendency.
Right. You recognize the aggressive tendency, you set the trap, and you exploit their predictable psychological reaction. You maximize profit based on human tendencies, not theoretical perfection.
Which means to capitalize on those 47 specific mistakes, you really have to stop staring at your own cards and start analyzing the humans across the table. Which leads us to the kind of the hidden layer of the game. The sources call this the poker in poker.
The meta strategy. This is the transition from playing the cards to playing the players. The text argues that the vast majority of people are stuck on level 1 thinking. They look down at their hand, they see two strong cards like an ace and a king, and they think, well, I have a good hand, therefore I should raise.
Which sounds completely logical. Like if I have a good hand, I want to put money in the pot.
It is logical in a vacuum, but it ignores the entire context of the environment.
Yeah.
The poker, in poker, is the adjustment layer. Let's look at the scenario the text uses.
Okay.
Imagine you're in a late position at the table with a medium strength hand. The player in the blind, the one forced to put money in before the cards are dealt, has been aggressively re-raising you all night. In poker, this aggressive re-raise before the flop is called a 3-bet. It's a statement of extreme strength.
So this player has just been bullying me for an hour.
Right. Level 1 thinking says my hand is decent, I'll raise, and if he re-raises, I'll fold because he's showing strength. Meta thinking the poker in poker says, wait, I need to build a psychological model of this specific player.
Okay.
He expects me to fold because he's been bullying me successfully. I know his actual range of cards is much weaker than the strength he's projecting. So instead of a standard play, I'm going to flat.
Flatting being just calling the bet, acting like a sponge to absorb their aggression?
Exactly. You just call to let them confidently try to bluff you later when the stakes are higher, or alternatively, you re-raise them immediately because you know they don't have a real hand to back up their bullying.
Yeah.
You're using their own assumptions about you against them.
You're playing the player, and the sources emphasize that this level of in-game awareness requires you to be actively engaged even when you aren't in a hand. You have to be watching everyone.
All the time.
Like who is tilting, emotionally compromised because they just lost a big pot? Who is playing with scared money because they can't afford to lose? Who has been sitting there for 2 hours getting terrible cards, growing completely impatient and just looking for an excuse to gamble? You are essentially building a real-time psychological profile of every single person at that table.
What's fascinating here is the sheer cognitive load that requires.
Right. I'm putting myself in the shoes of someone just trying to get better at this. Wait, I'm supposed to catalog the emotional state, the risk tolerance, and the recent trauma of 6 different human beings. I'm supposed to do complex pot odds math in my head, and I'm supposed to remember 47 different exploitable AI patterns.
It's a lot.
That sounds like an absolute recipe for massive, paralyzing information overload. Like my brain would just short circuit.
And the sources explicitly agree with you. They state clearly that nobody is born knowing how to navigate this naturally. Nobody instinctively knows how to balance that many variables in real time. If you attempt to process all of that consciously, you will crash your mental hard drive.
Yeah, absolutely.
The solution they present is structured practice. It's about transforming that overwhelming conscious mental load into automatic subconscious pattern recognition.
Okay, so we know what is going wrong. We know the 47 mistakes, and we know we need to understand the metagame. But knowing the trap is totally useless if you still fall into it when the pressure is on. How do we actually train our brains to spot these matrix-level patterns without quitting our day jobs to study all day? The sources outline a surprisingly short, highly specific, 20-minute daily routine.
Systems over instinct. That is the core philosophy here. They break those 20 minutes down very deliberately. 5 minutes reviewing flagged hands from your previous session, 10 minutes of intense scenario-based drills, and 5 minutes focused on mastering one single new concept.
I have to admit, 20 minutes a day sounds almost too easy.
Well, look at the compounding math. 20 minutes a day equals over 120 hours of focused, active training a year. Most players don't get 120 hours of truly focused, friction-heavy learning in an entire decade.
That's a great point.
And those 10 minutes of drills are really the engine of this entire system.
Let's talk about the mechanism of those drills, because this is where the AI really flexes. How does it actually work?
So the system puts you in a highly specific digital scenario. It's essentially a flight simulator for decision-making. You don't wait for a real engine to fail at 30,000 feet to see if your gut reaction is right.
Right, you'd be in trouble.
The AI forces you into a digital spot, say, facing a massive bet on the final card. You have to make a decision under pressure. You commit. And immediately, the AI tells you if you were right or wrong using what they call 13 by 13 range matrices.
Which sounds incredibly intimidating, but it's basically just a visual grid, right?
Yeah. Imagine a grid on your screen, 13 rows by 13 columns. It maps out every single combination of 2 starting cards you could possibly be dealt, all 169 of them.
Okay.
The AI color codes this grid in real time. Red for raise, blue for fold, green for call, based on the exact mathematical probabilities of the situation. It gives you instant, street-by-street feedback on why your decision was optimal or flawed.
It's severing that tie we talked about earlier. You don't have to wait to see if you won or lost a real pot to know if your decision was good. It turns panic into protocol.
Exactly. And they tie this daily habit into a broader session-to-session framework to prevent the exact information overload you were worried about. Before you sit down to play your real game, you take just 5 minutes, you look at your last 3 sessions, and you pick one single focus point for the night. Not 12 things, one.
Okay.
You tell yourself, tonight, I'm only going to focus on executing check raises when I have a drawing hand.
You narrow the aperture of your attention.
Then, crucially, comes the post-game review. After you finish playing, you have a 15-minute window where your memory is still fresh. The advice is highly specific. Do not flag the massive pots where you got incredibly lucky or horribly unlucky. Those are statistical anomalies.
Right.
You're instructed to flag 2 to 3 mundane decision points where you simply felt uncertain, where your gut hesitated. You feed those specific spots into the AI, and it turns that vague feeling of uncertainty into a concrete, solvable data point.
And the sources put a hard dollar amount on the compound effect of this feedback loop. They claim that if you use the AI to just plug 3 or 4 of those 47 leaks per session, you are saving yourself anywhere from $1,200 to $3,600 a month in lost expected value.
It's massive.
Yeah, you aren't even making brilliant highlight reel plays. You are literally just stopping the bleeding from the mistakes you didn't even know you were making. So what does this all mean? Because taking a bird's eye view of this entire system, I see a glaring structural flaw in the whole enterprise.
Structural flaw.
Yeah. Think about it. If RangeFlow's supercomputers are cataloging 4 million hands, successfully mapping all 47 of these predictable human mistakes, and then selling that data to players, eventually, doesn't the edge completely disappear? Like, if everyone subscribes to the AI, if everyone knows the 67% overfold rule, is there still a game to play? Doesn't the whole ecosystem just grind to a perfectly balanced, unprofitable halt?
That is an incredibly astute observation, and the creators of the system actually address it directly in a section labeled time sensitive.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they readily admit that the overall value of this specific data decreases for the entire player pool over time. Right now, the average player is completely blind to these 47 patterns. But as more people adopt the system, those specific exploitative edges will naturally shrink.
So it's an arms race.
It is an absolute arms race, and that reveals the true thesis of this entire deep dive. The ultimate competitive advantage isn't possessing today's list of 47 exploits. The ultimate competitive advantage is the meta skill of learning faster than your opponent.
Wow.
The AI is constantly updating its pool tendencies based on new hands. If the human player pool adapts, the AI simply finds the new leak created by that adaptation. The player who has built the daily 20-minute habit of active learning, the one who relies on a data-driven feedback loop rather than their ego, that player will always remain one step ahead of the curve even when the curve drastically changes.
Which brings this entire conversation right back to your daily life. Whether you're prepping for a high-stakes boardroom negotiation, whether you're trying to master a programming language, or you just want to be a more effective communicator with your partner, the core lesson from this poker AI translates perfectly.
It really does.
You have to stop passively consuming information. Watching endless YouTube tutorials is not going to break you through your plateau. You have to build a feedback loop. You have to force yourself to make decisions under pressure, track your moments of uncertainty, and ruthlessly judge your progress by the quality of your decisions, not just the randomness of your outcomes.
This raises an important question, though, a slightly unsettling one if we really sit with the implications.
Okay, I'm listening.
We just spent this time discussing how an artificial intelligence analyzed millions of interactions and perfectly mapped 47 predictable, highly exploitable flaws in human logic. And it accomplished this in poker, a game entirely predicated on deception, bluffing, and the illusion of unpredictability.
Yeah.
It found the hidden behavioral code we didn't even know we were following. So if a machine can perfectly map and exploit our irrationality at a card table, what other areas of our everyday human interactions are next?
Well,
Think about our economic choices, our political arguments, the way we negotiate a salary. Are we all just operating on a set of predictable, exploitable patterns, just waiting to be mathematically solved by the right algorithm?
are we all just playing checkers while the machine plays chess? I am going to be thinking about that for a long time. Take 5 minutes today to find your own focus point in whatever skill you're trying to master. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Catch you next time.